When it comes to history, there are a lot of partitions. A partition is splitting something up. In the sense of history, it's when a country, empire, province, any kind of geographical area is either completely divided up by outside parties, or there are bits and chunks taken out. A good example of a partition are the 3 partitions of Poland. Well, 4 if you count World War II. There's also the partition of British India, the Treaty of Versailles with Germany. Even the simple division of Korea into North and South counts as a partition. Partitions have had huge effects on not only the map, but how history goes forward. Just look at how Versailles influenced World War II, or how the partition of India has resulted in a massive rivalry and several years of war between India and Pakistan. Now imagine if one of these partitions went a completely different way, or if an entirely new partition happened. Potential decades or even centuries of history would be changed. So in this video I'm going to talk about 5 potential partitions that could have happened. More specifically, this video will focus on Europe, because there were a lot of them in Europe. But a future video will talk about others from around the world. Part of the reason why there are so many in Europe is that you had so many continental-wide wars, including both world wars, and partitioning was a common European punishment for the losing party in many cases. As you can imagine, there were a lot of World War II ones, which is another reason why Europe is getting its own video here. So let's get started with the one that's the least likely to happen. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, the Balkan states finished breaking away from the Ottoman Empire. Austria and Russia competed over influence in the region. Simultaneously, there was this idea that Austria-Hungary was very unstable and that it would collapse at any moment. Boy, were they right about that. And possibly the German parts would merge with Germany, while the rest would break away. With that in mind, if Austria broke up in that way, Russia would be the biggest influence over the Balkans, and many guessed or fearmongered that they'd set up practical puppet states all over the Balkans. So this is a map that proposed how Austria-Hungary would possibly be partitioned at some time in the future. Based on the borders of the Ottoman Empire right here, this was made after 1908 but before 1912. So effectively, if somehow World War I never happened, but Austria-Hungary collapsed anyway, maybe the result would look like this. It's not as likely of a partition, but there was enough of a speculation at the time to make maps like this. For the next map, we'll go further back to the French Revolution. After the monarchy was removed in France, the European powers went to war to try and stop them. But the opposite ended up happening, and France ended up expanding further, by a lot. Eventually this would of course result in Napoleon trying to conquer all of Europe. However, in 1793 there was a proposed partition of France if the European powers had managed to defeat the revolutionaries. What's interesting about this is that this is before Napoleon, yet this proposal was very harsh territorial-wise. Also, this partition of straight line across northeastern France, it's so awful. But this partition wouldn't have happened, not just because France didn't lose in 1793, but also because Britain didn't get anything out of this map, and there's no way that would happen, let's be real. But also, the person who proposed this was William Playfair, who was famous but only as an economist and an engineer. It's like if celebrities on Twitter proposed partition maps or something, it'd be weird. But this type of thing would be interesting to think about, especially these weird quirky things like expanding Geneva. Well, for the next half of the video, we're going to talk about World War II partitions, but before we get to that, I'm partitioning this video in half by talking about today's sponsor, Ridge Wallets. I've talked about Ridge many times because they're just that good. You don't need to partition your cards between multiple pockets, and can instead fit them in between metal plates with this wonderful design. If you use the code EMPEROR with the link below, you can get 10% off a Ridge wallet. You won't regret it. Thanks to Ridge for sponsoring this video. So World War II is famous for many partitions in regards to treating the defeated Axis powers. Germany famously ended up being partitioned into occupation zones for the United States, United Kingdom, Soviet Union, and France for a few years before they became West and East Germany. Berlin was also famously divided the same way, as well as Austria and their capital Vienna, although Austria was made wholly united and independent in 1955. But there were 3 notably proposed partitions of Germany and Austria at the Yalta Conference, and well, it's obvious why they were rejected. First, we have Henry Morgenthau's partition plan. Henry Morgenthau was US President Franklin Roosevelt's Secretary of the Treasury, and he proposed a plan to prevent Germany from ever being a threat again. It's, very weird. We have a North Germany and a South Germany, but then also a massive international zone in Schleswig and Western Germany. I have no idea if this international zone was short-term or what, but man, that would look awful. Also, France gets a chunk of the Palatinate, blech, although at least Poland got some of Silesia. Then we have FDR himself with his own partition plan. He divided up Germany even more, bringing back Prussia, Bavaria, Hesse, Saxony, and Hanover, although at least Austria is in one piece. Then again, there are still international zones. Why? Also, it's disappointing that other than the southern half of East Prussia, Poland sadly gets nothing. But perhaps the most drunken-looking partition map is Winston Churchill's. So, with Winston, we have a west, a north, and a south. West is kind of small, but also there's something odd with South Germany. Not only does it include Austria, but for some reason he wanted to lump Hungary into it? Why? I don't get it. Also, Poland once again only gets parts of East Prussia. This clearly would have been a disaster of a partition. One can imagine how horrible Europe would look with any of these partitions, as well as how much that would change history. Although channel patrons will be able to see exclusive full resolution maps of these terrifying alternate histories. But, like I said, there's plenty potential partitions to enjoy for future videos, especially outside of Europe. I'm Emperor Tigerstar, and I'll see you guys next time.